Hello, and welcome. I recently did a session with Danielle Stein Fairhurst from Plum Solutions. Danielle does these monthly meetups where we discuss things around Excel, and I recently did a session with her called Automating Month-End Processes with Power Query and Dynamic Arrays, where I covered quite a lot of information over that hour. So just so that you know, this actual recording will be made available on my YouTube channel, and then the recording of the actual session with Danielle is also available on her YouTube channel. So I'll link to that down below in the description. Then I'll also be posting a link to download the files that we used or that I used in this presentation, including the slides and the documents themselves. So the folder structure actually contains all of the files that I used in the Power Query setup, and then also I'll be sharing an empty version of this file as well as the Life of Capital file, and also my questions answered from the session. So I've answered those questions in a lot of detail, and then also the slides, so that you can refer back to this training at any point in time, and you can also use the empty file that I'll be sharing in this folder structure to follow along with me in this session. So I am pretty much winging it. So I don't know how long we'll be taking. There's no script to this. I'm just winging it. So please bear with me. What I'll do is I'll put chapters at the bottom of this video as well, to ensure that you can follow along with me. And yeah, that's pretty much, I think, what I want to cover as part of the intro. So just to showcase what we're working towards, we'll be pulling in a trial balance from a PDF file. We'll be pulling in multiple GLs from different files per month. So there's multiple Excel documents that we'll be pulling in using Power Query. Chart of accounts with a supplemented sort of extra expanded chart of accounts table that's contained within the actual workbook itself, and a debtors ledger converted in the actual format that we wanted, including debtors balances, opening and closing balances with the dates of those balances, and then a cash book, and like I said, the expanded chart of accounts. So that's sort of the setup initially to get the input documents in, and then using quite a couple of dynamic array tricks. We'll be pulling in information using things like sort, unique, transpose, the AND operator. We'll be doing XLOOKUP in quite a lot of detail, a by column sum. Then the new GROUPBY and Pivotby functions we'll be covering as well. And then there'll also be a section on pivot, filter. We'll be covering a bit of the sort of tick boxes that you can find these days. The checkboxes, I think, is what they're called. Checkboxes, yes. And then we'll be covering a let function, a little bit of sort of dynamic array drop downs, dependent drop downs, how to set that up, and then the legend contains those data sets for the drop downs. So just showcasing a couple of things that you can do in modern Excel in order to actually build dashboards and reports that you can, next month, just click refresh. So the idea is that next month I'll go to my documents folder, I'll pull the new cash book, the new chart of accounts, the new debtors ledger, I'll pull another month's GL, so I'll pull the October GL into the folder structure, and a new trial balance, whether it's PDF doesn't matter, and I'll just go back into Excel and go into my data and into my data model and just click on refresh, and that would update my whole spreadsheet. If I have pivot tables, I might need to update those as well, and pivot charts, but we'll be covering this in a lot more detail, hopefully covering everything in one go, on how I set this up and how to build this going forward. Right, so I'm going to pull that one to the side. I've got an empty one that I'll quickly just refer to, and we'll continue. All right, so let's continue with the Power Query side of things. We'll start from the beginning. So I know that it's always better to actually look at my files before putting things in. So I might open up the chart of accounts before pulling in anything into Power Query, just to make sure that I understand the structure and what I'm working towards, and just to get a visual feel for it, because sometimes not doing that step might actually end up me losing time in the end. So I'll just open that up with Notepad, and essentially I will see that I've got a sort of category, and then I've got an account number, name, etc. So let's pull that in, and essentially what I'll do is I'll pull that from a text or CSV file, and I'll go into my documents, and I'll go into my chart of accounts and click on import. And what that would do is it'll open up the intermediate window. Over here I can change the file origin, and most of the time it picks it up automatically, but I might have a US ASCII file or something like that, and it could be a different sort of a structure to it, and sometimes I would need to go through that file origin to find the actual structure. What I can then do is I can load it directly if I wanted to. I can load it into the file or load it to a data model, but this isn't ready yet. I almost always go into transform data. So this is what that looks like. That would invoke the Power Query editor. It's already called chart of accounts, so I don't have to change that name. I can change the name here by double clicking it and then typing a new name, or just changing the name there. I'm just going to leave it as chart of accounts. And as we can see, the source has been applied as a step, so it's essentially bringing back the fact that it used that file path as the source with a text file and a file origin. And in a lot of steps you can click on this little settings cog, and you can actually go and change settings that you've done. You can even go into advanced parts of it in order to actually take file parts, etc. Anyway, so what I'll do is I'll remove the fluff, so I can see that my row that my first couple of rows are essentially just sort of reference data, so I'll remove that. But firstly, let's go and split the column by delimiter, because I can see that it's comma delimited, and that it's got a quote character of a double quotes. So I want to split it each occurrence at a comma with a quote character. And again, I've got many options, many advanced options here. Next up, I would want to maybe remove the top 3 rows so that I can just get to my name, yeah, or my column names. So and you'll see that there's a change type that occurs every time. I don't like that. I actually want to switch that off. So I believe that you can switch that off somewhere. I'm not sure if it's in your query options or whatever, but I might just go and look for that setting and just disable it. There's other settings that I have disabled as well. That includes so I'm not sure where that is. Detect column types. Okay, so never detect column types and headers for unstructured references. Okay, and then what I also do is I never load into worksheet or data model. I don't use standard load settings. I go and I want to specifically choose so that it always goes into a connection. So hopefully that works a bit better now. So let's remove the top 3 rows. So I can just go remove top 3 rows and say, well, there we go. Remove the top 3 rows. Now I can see my headers are over 2 lines. There's a little trick that I learned from Win Hopkins that allows me to actually get that into 1 line. It's under the transform tab. You can go and transpose, or maybe it's home. Sometimes I need to go look for things. Luckily, there's only really two tabs that that does that. So transpose essentially takes rows to columns and columns to rows. So essentially now there's my header. So I can see that the header is split over 2 rows or 2 columns now, where it used to be over 2 rows. And now I can use the merge column field or the merge column function to go and maybe just put a space in between. It doesn't matter what I call it, because it will basically be destroyed on the next transposition. So I just go and click on OK, and that would basically make that the new headings. I might want to go and trim this as well, because now I've got spaces where I had my explanation in the bottom, in the second column. So it had empty space and then tax code. Same with blocked. So I might want to just trim that information. And with that, I think I can use format and trim, and that basically removes that, and that can now I can take it back to transpose, and basically now it's done. So essentially, my headers are ready to be promoted. So I can now go and say, well, use first row as headers, and that would take that row into my headers. I could see that some of them don't have headers yet, but we'll clean that up in the end. I might want to also take my financial category across, or I definitely do want to. And there's something that I can see in this data, and I can do it with the filter. Maybe let me just talk about how I've got this row of information. If you go into your view, you can choose your column quality and column distribution options, and that will essentially give you information about the column itself. It'll tell you if there's errors, etc. So that's quite nice. So I recommend switching that on under the view section. And basically I can now go and extract this information. So if I go and I click on the filter, I can see I've got many blanks. We'll get rid of those soon. And then I've got a / for everything that's an account. And then any financial category would be denoted by financial category, and then what's that, colon, I think colon, and then the category itself. So how I would do that is I would select the column, and I would say, you know what, I could do column from examples, and we'll show an option in that. But what I typically do is I go into the custom column. And for this, again, I'm not gonna necessarily name this something, but I can call this FinCat if I wanted to. And essentially what I'm trying to do is I want to extract information if there's a financial category. So what I could do is I could go and say if, and then I can use my text function. So I could say text dot. So let's just go back. If the text contains, or maybe begins with, starts with, it might be starts with. So I could say if the text starts with financial category or whatever, or I could just go and say if text contains, and essentially it'll tell me what I need to refer to. So I'm referring to the text in the account column. So I'm just going to double click on account, and that will put in the account. So if my text in the account column contains, comma, substring as text, and basically I'm going to select colon, then what do we want to do? So close the bracket. Then we want to actually bring back the account value, else null, and essentially it'll tell me no syntax errors have been detected. What it'll do is it'll create a new FinCat column that will only contain the financial category, because everything else would not contain that colon, which would make it null, and the null makes it so that I can fill down. So in my transform tab, I can click on fill down, and essentially just click on, well, if I click on fill down, it fills in that financial category downwards to include share capital, retained income, etc. So now that that's done, I can get rid of all the other columns. So let me just move this to, I'll just move this to the beginning, and then I'll move it over to where I want it to. So maybe I would want that to be third. And essentially I can see that this is information I need. So every time, so I can get rid of this information now because that is now contained in the same line as the actual account details. So I can get rid of all of the noise now. So basically how I typically do that is I can right click there and say everywhere where it does not equal blank, filter that out. But then I'll still be left with this information, for instance. That I don't need anymore, but I can see that the first sort of column with information that that I want to keep, that I know I want to keep, would be containing all of the account names, and basically with that I can right click and say everything that does not equal null. So I right click on the null itself, text filters does not equal, and that would remove all nulls from that column. Okay, so I've got account, and then this would be, so I would just maybe change this to account number. So I just double click and say account name, enter. And then this is now my financial category, so I can now split that up. So I can split the column by the limiter, and essentially I could split it where it contains something that's custom, and I can go space, colon, space, and okay, and it will basically split it so that it's between financial category and share capital. I can now delete that column because I no longer need it, but let's just pull it to that side, and I'll showcase what we can do now. The other thing is I want to now split by this column, or by this this dash, but it looks like a longer dash, so I might want to actually just extract that information. So what I can do is I can click on the actual value itself, and you'll see that it basically brings that value across to the bottom. So I can copy that out so that I can make sure that I've got that space dash space there, and then I can go and say, well, okay, split for me this column by a custom space dash space, and okay. And you'll see that Power Query actually automatically went and identified that there's a dash. I didn't need to do that in actual fact, but I just wanted to showcase that functionality as well. So I could now call this category code, and I can call this category. Okay, so now I've got that information. I don't need financial category. And then I'll look at the other stuff and I'll check whether I need anything. So I only have financial category there. In there I only have blanks. I only have no tax type defaults. I have no tax code. It's no underblocked blanks. So the other information is useless. So I can just keep the first 4 columns and remove the other columns. And I actually recommend that because if the other columns changes, if those columns become more or less, or some of those columns fall away, the actual query itself, and maybe it's a good idea to go into this, but I'm only selecting the columns with these 4 names, and all the steps before that make sure that that is the case. So I know that my query is built more robustly for future changes in the data set itself. And then I can also go into the actual right-click advanced editor, and I can show you the steps, and you can see that it's using M code or M language or M query language, and essentially it's very much understandable once you start working with it, but very powerful. So essentially that's step 1, that's the next step, and the next step refers to the previous step and continues on that. You can actually read exactly what it's doing, and you can actually change certain things with that process as well. So again, this is not necessarily the most effective way of doing it, but it is a way, and just I guess this is a quick crash course. As you learn Power Query a lot more, you become more and more versed in it, and you become better at it. So we're just again scratching the surface, even though this is pretty much a very advanced functionality that I'm showing. So now I can click on this little button to close and load, or I can go and close and load too. If I just go close and load, because of that setting that I showed, it will basically go and load it into the connection only. And I prefer that because sometimes I don't want to load it into my what do you call it, table structure, etc. But we'll show that now. And a very good sort of step here is I want to now actually pull this across as well. So I can now go and stand anywhere there. Because this is a table already, I can just click on from table or range. If it was just a range, it would ask me to make it a table so that we can pull this into Power Query. I didn't need to transform anything here because essentially everything is ready for me. But I want to bring these 3 columns across into my chart of accounts as well. And with that, I can use the merge queries function. So I can click on merge queries as new. That would create a new query on the left hand side, but I just want to add this to my chart of accounts. So I'm just going to click on merge queries, and that would add it into chart of accounts. So now I'm going to say, well, I want to merge chart of accounts and chart of accounts expanded, and the field that I want to merge on is account number. Now what's cool about this is I can actually select more than one field, and it'll show me whether I've got a perfect match or not, and whether there are unmatched rows. In this case there are none, but I didn't need the category code, so I'm just pressing control to deselect, control to select as well. But essentially you don't need to just use one field, and I can see that I've got a perfect match. I don't have to do fuzzy matching, and a fuzzy match is essentially allowing me to match it if it's almost, or if it's like something. So look at my name, for instance. My name is Renier, R-E-N-I-E-R. Sometimes people misspell it by saying R-E-I-N-E-R. So the I and the N is swapped, and a fuzzy match would essentially match those 2 records to one another. All right, and then the left outer join is the most used. I think if you don't understand joins yet, I think it's a good time to actually look for a YouTube video. I might just post a link to one that explains what types of joins you get and what they mean. Left outer is the most used one, and then I'll click on OK, and that'll add a table to this table for me, or to this query as well. So then I can click on this little icon there to expand the table, and I always untick this use original column name as prefix, otherwise it just makes my column names ugly. And then I'll basically go and only select the ones I want to bring across. I've got account number and category code in here already. I don't need it, so I'll just go and click on OK. And that will bring across my statement, my classification, and my second layer of classification as well. Now my chart of accounts is ready to load, so I can now click on close and load to, and that would essentially bring back the close and load to import data tab. Only create a connection is now the default one, but I want to basically bring this into a table in a new worksheet, and I want to add it to the data model. And we'll talk about the data model in Power Pivot a bit later on. Now you'll see it brought across my chart of accounts expanded, which is not what I wanted. I actually wanted to bring my chart of accounts across, but I did bring in the expanded one previously. What I can do is I can just go and delete the sheet, and deleting the sheet would basically make it a connection only again. No, it won't, because it's loaded to the data model. So I'll just untick that, remove it from the data model, and then it becomes a connection only again. I can then right click into this and click on, if I click on edit, it takes me back into Power Query, or I can literally just double click on it as well to bring it to open up Power Query again. But I can right click and say load to, select table, new worksheet, and add it to the data model, and that would bring my chart of accounts across into this. Okay, so that's number one. Number two is essentially now bringing across, let's just see, let's take the PDF one, which is the trial balance. So I can click on Get Data under my Data tab, and under Get Data I can say from file, from PDF. And now I can select tb.pdf and import. It takes a while because it's basically opening up the PDF, reading the data within it. And the nice thing about this is a structured PDF, so I can just select table 1, and that spans both pages, so I don't need to distinguish between the pages, which is awesome. Otherwise I can pull them in page by page. And there's a little trick. If you're bringing this across and you want to merge the two pages, if you don't have this option, you can actually right click and transform the data from this step. We might do this a bit later, but that takes you directly into Power Query without selecting this first, and then you can basically expand into page 1 and page 2, maybe as two separate queries, and then basically unioning those, performing a union, and I think that is called append table in Power Query. I'll show you now, or append query, and again, always go transform, because there's always something that I want to transform. But maybe that's just me, but I always going to transform, at least make sure that my field types are fine. For instance, why I would transform this is I would want to perhaps make this not just a debit and a credit. I would want to make it a net amount, or just make it an amount. I would want to rename stuff. I would want to promote headers. I would want to remove the South African rand symbol, the R, and just make it numbers. So there's lots of information that I want to make sure that I go and do, and I also want to rename this into TB. So now this is directly from the PDF itself. So I can see that I can promote my headers, because my headers are on the first row, so I can use first row's headers. And then the other thing is I want to maybe put last year all the way on the right, so I can just click and drag that, or I can right click and say move to end if I wanted to. My account is already fine, but I might want to call this account number as I have previously, so that the field joining makes a lot more sense. This would be called account name, and that would now correlate with my chart of accounts, because my chart of accounts also has account number and account name. And then debits and credits, I would want to make that one field. Firstly, I want to remove all the R's, like I said, so I'll just select all 3 columns, and then I'll right click. No, if you're doing one, you could right click on it and you could say replace values, and that would basically fill in that information for you already. And then you could basically say I want to just replace R's with nothing. But now I don't want to do that. I want to do that across all 3 columns. So I'm going to select all 3 of them and say remove replace values. And basically the value I want to find is R, and I want to replace it with nothing. And I click on OK. So that removes all my rand values. Then I also see I've got commas in there. I want to remove the commas because they could be confusing, because currently these are text values. So let me replace the commas. So again, I'll do the same. I'll say replace values. I'll say replace commas with nothing. And that would remove all the commas as the 1000 separators. And I'm pretty much almost ready to convert this into numbers. Let's just see if we convert this into numbers. I'll just right click and say change type, and I'll say decimal number. And you'll see we've got errors spanning across everything. So why is that? Okay, it's because of a locale issue. You might not have that issue depending on where you are, what your region is. But if I go and change type using locale, you'll see that it basically gives me the ability to now say I want to change it by decimal number, but from a South African perspective, this is what we're expecting. But if I'm going into the UK, we mostly use UK notation. we've got the, well, it looks like the same thing. But that locale doesn't error out. And then what's awesome is a little trick is I can then say keep rows, keep errors, just to make sure that I don't have any errors in those 3 columns. If there were errors, it would return those errors. And if I'm working with hundreds and thousands of rows of data, I would want to know if there's an error in the process that I'm not aware of yet. Sometimes this error percentage could be 0, but it's because you've got so many values running across. And I would want to maybe call this, instead of last year, I would call it PY, previous year. And now I want to basically merge this into one field. So I want to put credits and debits together. I can see that credits are negatively denoted in the previous year. So essentially what I can now do is I can create a column. So I can say add column, custom column. You can also do conditional columns. What I did previously is essentially a conditional column, and I'll showcase how to do that a bit later as well. You can always add index columns as well. So you can have an index running from 0 to the number of rows, to have an index of rows if you want to basically keep the order, or you want to refer to odd rows or even rows or something like that. So is the sky is literally the limit here. Right. So let's see, if we now go and say custom column, I would want to go and say, well, take negative credit and then add positive debit and click on OK. And I can see that all of it is essentially null. And that the reason for that is because it's trying to take a null and deducting it from a number. It's not seeing a null as a 0, but as a null. Okay. So what I would do firstly is I'm just clicking on the cross to remove those, and I can see that there's already zeros on the last year, in the last year column, and it's already a decimal number, so that's fine. So what I'll just do is I'll just remove, or I'll replace nulls with zeros. So I'll just go null and replace that with 0. Okay. Now we can do that same function, or that same column, and we'll call this CY for current year. Okay. And basically that's negative credit plus positive debit. Click on OK. And now it's working perfectly. Okay. So now I can remove these 2 columns. Okay. And again, proper process would possibly be to say, well, I want to rather keep account number, account name, current year, and prior year. I'm just holding in control to select the ones, and then I'll say remove the other columns, and that just future proofs my query a lot more. I can see now that this type isn't decimal number, so I'll just change the type to decimal number, and that should then change everything to the decimal number. If I want to make sure that I don't have errors, I can select everything, Control A, and just basically go and say home, keep errors. And if the table is empty, that means there's no errors. I'll show you elsewhere where errors will also be shown. I can now close and load, and that would bring my TB across as a connection only. Again, I can load that into a table on a new worksheet, add it to the data model, click on OK. It would already contain the sheet name, and now because this is decimals, I can actually go and apply a cell style to it, and it'll actually carry that across. So my trial balance is essentially working as it should as well. Perfect. So we've got chart of accounts, we've got trial balance. Next up, we want to do let me just see. I just want to see that my TB is not looking like it should. I just want to see. It does have many gaps. so it might be fine. I would just maybe visually make sure that my amounts are lining up, and I would maybe add some formulas and stuff as well, just to make sure that I've got everything. The other check on a TB, of course, is I can go and sum up my values and see. Can you see that? You can't see that, but basically, if I just go sum of, and I'll hold it just below the C, just above the name, click, that would select my whole column, and I can see that that is essentially null. It was not null, 0, and my prior year is actually 2.5 million, which might be my retained earnings value, but I won't be too concerned about that for now. If it was my monthly report, I would spend time and make sure that amount is 0, like it should be. There might just be a reason why it's not. Right, so next up, we want to bring in, so we've brought in the TB. I've included the Excel as well if you wanted to do that. We've done the chart of accounts. So next up, let's do the GL. So I also have the full GL for the 6 months, and then I also have the separate folder one. So let's do the folder one, because I want to show a couple of tricks there. So you can say get data from file from folder, and there I can now go and select my column, my folder in the documents, and click on open. And what that does is it basically brings back the folder contents. I can then directly go into transform if I wanted to, which would basically just bring back up to this step. But otherwise, I always go, if I want to combine it, I always go combine and transform, because that then writes the function for me and invokes the function as well, to make sure that we've got everything. Again, you can also at this step now go and transform the data if you wanted to by right clicking on parameter 1, or you can just say I want to bring back sheet 1. In this case, lucky for me, we're just using sheet 1. If you're using more than one sheet, you'd want to maybe step into this level. Again, I can use sheet 1. I can use the first file as a sample, or I can choose any one of them as a sample if there's maybe a more complete one. And I don't want to skip files with errors. If there's errors, I want it to tell me that there's an error, and I'll show you where that would actually show. So if I now look at the GLs, I'll just basically show you what has happened. So it's basically created a helper group called transform file from GLs. And inside this, there's helper queries. There's the sample file, but this is the transformed sample file. And then the function transform file, it basically just allows a parameter, and that parameter would be the actual file name. The sample file is this the content of this little March 2024 file, which sits inside this column, or inside this folder, and I can see how many bytes it is, and then this is just basically the function that is being transformed. So the parameter being the sample file that basically transforms into this. Now the nice thing about this is, from this, it's also creating a GLs file which contains the actual month name for the GL. So the source name is there, and then all of the contents. So if I go back into source, you can see that we started off with the 7 months, and essentially what's happened is it filtered for hidden files as well. So basically bringing back hidden files if there's any hidden files as well. It invoked that custom function, which is the function above. And that invocation of the function brought back the transform file field. Then it went and expanded on those fields. Not sure what that renamed columns is doing. It maybe just renamed some of the columns. removed all the other columns so that we only have the source name and the transform file left. But you might want to keep some of these columns because there might be helpful information if you want to take the latest date modified of certain files, for instance. That's also an option. And then basically I've removed all the other columns, expanded the table column into the contents of the actual file. And then this is quite helpful because now I can use this going forward to refer to the month and year as well. I can extract it from the actual date of the transaction or of the transaction itself, but that date might be backdated or forward-dated, but in a specific month. So this would still be helpful information. But before I do that, sometimes I actually like going into, because I can remove the noise from this combined file, but sometimes I like to remove the noise from the actual core file itself. And there's quite a lot of things that makes it quite helpful, because if I know that my structure never changes, because this is extracted directly from the from the ERP system itself, I can just remove some of the noise, and it basically removes it before running the combine, which just makes it a bit more powerful in the end. So let's maybe do that. So I'll remove the top two rows. So we'll remove top two rows. I could also have gone and filtered out the nulls if I wanted to. Not doing that now. And then basically I want to keep this sales. Okay. I want to remove opening and closing balances because I've got that information in my TB. And if I don't trust my TB or I don't trust my GL, I might want to keep it, or I might want to just maybe do a reference to it at that stage, extract just the opening and closing balances and compare that to the TB. Up to you. But I want to remove opening balance and closing balance. So what I'll do is I'll basically say filter everything that does not contain. But then I'll go into the step and say I just want to remove everything in the date field that does not contain the word balance. Okay, I don't know what's happening now. It's freezing over here. Not good. Okay, so let's just do it in the text side of things. So I'll just remove balance. So that would also remove closing balance. Okay, and then what I might also do is I might also want to remove some of these nulls, but we'll do that now. So let's extract the actual account number, because stupidly the guys that built this decided that it's a good idea to actually say, okay, this is sales, and then show all the data, and then the next one would be like cost of sales, and then show the data, etc. So not good practice from a data perspective. I want to actually contain or carry this information inside the every row. So what do? I can now do a conditional column. So let's do that. Okay, I'm going to say add a column, conditional column, and basically all that a conditional column is, it's basically an if. Okay, so I can then say, well, if column 1, which is my date, contains, and then basically say, you know what, a colon. In this case, again, we've got the same principles. We don't expect a colon in a date, so that's how I would extract that information. Then output a column, and the column is column 1. Otherwise, null. Okay, and I think we'll just enter a value. I think that's fine. So let's see if it works. Perfect. Okay, now I can fill down. So I can say transform fill down, and basically it will contain sales across. Then I want to basically just extract data from it. So I just want to extract. So I'll just go extract the first maybe text before and limiter, and I'll just say my delimiter in this case is space, space, colon, space, and click on OK. So now it's extracted everything before that, and I could maybe just click and show everything and see, okay, I've got everything I'm happy with, it looks cool, happy with that, and now I can call this account number if I wanted to, but we'll okay, wait, let me not do that reorder. Let me rather say right click and move to beginning. Alright, and then I can now promote my headers. Let's just remove any nulls. So I'll remove any null in my cumulative field. So we'll just go does not equal null. Okay, and then I can go and promote my headers. So I'll use first row as headers. So now I'm expecting everything to be clean. I can do some more things and I'll show you now, but what I'll also do is I might want to just check in the data that I'm only seeing stuff that I'm expecting. I'm not seeing any opening balances, I'm not seeing any closing balances, I'm not seeing any blanks, I'm not seeing any nulls. I believe that I now have only dates and the data as such. So I'm only looking at March. So my data is pretty clean before we actually combine. Okay, yeah. Right. So essentially now, what that means is because I've done that, the data that comes out of this is already a lot cleaner than it was before I did the combination. But I can do some more things. I can also call this account number. The reason why I didn't want to carry the account name across is because that information is in my TB and in my chart of accounts. I don't need it in my GL as well. If I add another column to the GL, let's say this GL was, so this GL is about 18,000 rows roughly, maybe 19,000. But if I kept all of that, I have another field with data, which makes my data a lot larger. If I had 100,000 rows, it makes megabytes, potentially megabytes of an impact on the actual file size, and makes it a lot quicker and simpler to transform. So that's why I wouldn't keep that information. Right. Again, I want to maybe remove cumulative, and I want to combine credit and debit in one. I want to replace any blanks with 0. So I'll just go replace. And again, this breaks. Don't know why. It's not good. So let's maybe just remove this cumulative column. I'll just go and remove. Again, possibly better to say remove other columns, but let's just remove that cumulative column. And let's just see if it plays with now. So let's go. Does not equal. Oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to filter. I want to replace values, and it's not working. Okay, so I'm just using escape to go out. So let's maybe load that in. One thing I want to do is I want to remove the XLSX, and I want to split the month and the year. So what I'll do is I'll firstly go perhaps and say, you know what, I want to split. I want to extract everything before the full stop. Okay, that removes the XLSX. And then I want to split the column by delimiter. It'll automatically pick up the dash, and I click on OK. That brings across my month and my year. Right, and then I would maybe just put that next to my date so that it makes logical sense. And that should be fine. I want to also convert this to a date, but then if I convert this to a date, you'll see that I've got probably have some errors. You can see I've got a 61% error rate, and the reason for that is if I click on that, so I can click on that and it will basically expand and drill down. So I'll show you. That'll drill down into this, but I don't want to drill down. If I just want to see the error, I can scroll to it and I can click to the right of that so that I select the cell, and then it shows me the data format error, basically saying that it can't parse it into a date value, and essentially it's probably trying to swap the year and the month around. So in South Africa, as with most countries in the world, we take our format is essentially DD/MM/2024. That's also the UK format, so I always use the UK locale. So again, let's just remove the change type step. I would actually go and right click on the column, change type using locale, and then go and say again it's broken. Okay, I'll fix that. Let me fix that quickly. Right, let's try again. So essentially I can now go, hopefully, and combine these into two. So hopefully I can now go and replace values, and the value to find is a blank, and I want to replace that with a 0 and click on OK. And that basically does that for me. I want to do the same for this row, or for this data. So I'm just going to right click on this and say replace values. Again, I'm just going to go and let's just make that a 1 and replace that with a 0, because it's not allowing me to put a blank now, where previously it allowed me to put a blank because blanks existed. So or existed in the way that I set it up. I don't know why that happens, but so let's just take 1 and replace it with 0, and now I just need to make sure that that reads the same. So you can see that basically I'm saying replace values blank with a 0 in debit, and basically I want to do the same there. So I'm just going to go into the step and replace a blank with a 0 in inverted commas, and if I press enter, that will read the same as that one, which would do the same thing essentially. Now I can create that little debit minus credit column, and basically what I'll do is I'll add a column, custom column. I don't want to do it before, I don't want to insert a step, I want to do it after. And basically my custom column, I'll call that amount, and I'll basically say that this is equal to minus credit plus debit, and OK. And I've got errors. That is interesting. And if I click there, it'll tell me that can't convert numbers to text. Okay, so that means I need to put an intermediate step in where I just go and convert these two into decimal numbers. Insert. And firstly, I might want to also make sure that even though my error percentages are 0, that it is actually 0. So I'll just go and keep that selected, go and keep rows that are errors, and insert that step is fine. Table is empty, no errors. Perfect. Which means I can remove that step, go back into added custom, and I'll have no errors. And that means I can remove my debit and credit columns, remove columns. Now I pretty much have my GL built and ready, but that's only for one month, because I'm still working in the transform sample file. I can even change the formatting. I can change this to dates using locale, like I wanted to, and I can then go and say, well, I want to put a date in a UK format, which is that specific date, and click on OK. Now I don't have errors, and yeah, pretty much done. This needs to be a decimal number as well. Okay, that's fine. Description, contra, etc. Right, so I can see GLs is actually bringing back an error, which is great, because that means I can show you how to fix that. basically I can see that the column debit wasn't found, which is expected because we removed debit. So it worked up to this point, which means that up to this point we were still fine. It just didn't like the reordered columns. So I'll just remove the reordered columns, because that was essentially just reordering it, bring the month and year across. So I'll just do that manually afterwards. Otherwise, the renamed columns, for some stupid reason, actually includes the whole includes all the column names, and that's why it would have errored out, because the debit column and the credit column would have been referenced here, because it still existed at this stage. But now it doesn't anymore, so we don't have any issues. Right, so that looks perfectly fine. Again, I can go and select the whole GL. I can say keep errors, and just make sure that I don't have errors. Perfect. So we're good. Now I can go and close and load. So sometimes you won't want to actually carry the GLs across into your sheets, because it might be too large. In this case, I'm going to, because it's not too large, and because I want to showcase some functionality on that. But I could just load this into my data model and still build pivot tables and pivot charts on it, still do aggregations and calculations through Power Pivot. I can still do quite a lot of things with it, even if it's only a connection in the data model. But I'm going to add it to data model and put it in a new worksheet in this case. And you'll see we're loading about 18,000 rows here. And if there were any errors, it would have told me 23 errors or something like that. So if you don't have errors, perfect. If you do, you go back and you go and look for the errors, and we fix them. I'll probably do a video at some stage where I showcase how that's done. The other thing is I also want to basically maybe do some formatting on this, and because this is numbers, these are numbers now. I am supposed to be numbers. I see it's not, because I can't format it and because I can't sum it up. So that means it didn't carry the formatting across, which means the formatting steps that I performed on this side might have been a waste of time. So again, it seems like I need to do it on this side. So let's do it on this side. So good lesson. Don't do it on the other side, unless you need it for a specific reason. But yeah, so date, and we have United Kingdom. Okay, perfect. And then this is a decimal number. Okay, I think that's all I changed, all I need to change. I could make these whole numbers as well. Don't need to, but I could, so it should be fine. And then close and load. And that would run the query again and update the data, as you can see here at the bottom. And sorry, I can see you can't see it at the bottom there. Hopefully my camera isn't in too much in the way, I hope. Okay, then we can now format that perfectly, and I can also format this as a short date, and it'll format as a short date. I can do it a long date as well, just to showcase what that looks like. Okay, so that's the GL. Alright, and that means we've done quite a lot of them. We've done GL, we've done TB, so GL, TB is done, chart of accounts is done, and that one is done. So we just have cash book and debtors ledger left. Good. We'll continue that now. All right. Let's do the cash book and the debtors ledger next. So, right. Let me just open up the right one. So, again, we'll go data, get data. In this case, we can do from Excel workbook, because our cash book is in an Excel workbook. Click on import. And in this case, again, luckily we can just import sheet 1, transform data, as I always do. In this case, I want to call this cash book, so I'll just call it CB, and I can now extract the information that I need. I can see that the top 2 rows I can remove, so I can remove top rows if I wanted to, or I could even remove nulls, but I see that I want to carry over the account, so let's do our account. Let's carry our account and fill it down like we've done previously. Again, we can do a transform, an add column, a conditional column, and we could say if column 1, which is that one, contains a colon, then output a column 1, else null. So this removes the need for us. We could call this account, but we might change it anyways because we'll split stuff out. So let's just, doesn't really matter what I call that new column. Now, okay, so I can see that I want to remove opening balances as well. So in this case, I can, where it contains or it does not contain opening balance. So no, that's wrong. So let's go back to filtered rows. So I guess where this does not contain opening balance, and in this case I'll just remove everything so that I'm sure that it only filters out everything with balance, so that if there's different dates to balances, and you'll see that is the case, I believe. So where there's different dates, it doesn't matter, and it basically removes the opening and closing balances, and then we can just check our conditional column, and now we can fold down the conditional column so that it keeps my my cash book across. I also want to remove any totals, so the total I could also remove, so anywhere where it does not contain the word total, I'll just remove all of the noise. So it removes all totals, and then I can remove all these nulls later on to remove all the rows at the bottom. So for now, I just want to carry across this cash book 1 value, and now I can fold down the information. So I'll just select the column and then go to transform and fold down, and now I can remove any nulls in my values or in my amount column, because then I know it'll only keep headers as well as all the actual data that I want to keep. So I'll basically go and say everything that does not equal null, so that it keeps that, and then I can go and use first row's headers, and I essentially have everything that I need. This I can now split up, so I would want to extract everything before, let's just see, bank account. I guess I could just keep this and just call it account. We'll see if we want to use it later on. Okay, so account exists, so let's say account name, and that account is something different. So right, I think that's all I need. I can see that we've got a completely blank column here. I can delete that one. I could also just press the delete button. I want to convert this into decimal numbers, so we're okay with that, and that's pretty much it. I might also be able to throw away this column completely, but if you had multiple cash books, it would be nice to know which cash book it comes from. So that's why it's nice to have that information as well. But other than that, not much other transformation that's required. I could also convert the dates. That would also be helpful. I just use the locale by default. And again, we've got that issue. So weird. Right, let me just close and load. See what that does. Let's just load that into a table, new worksheet. Can add it to the data bundle. We might want to use it later on. There's my cash book. My amounts are now numbers, so that's good. My dates aren't converted yet, so let's just go into Power Query again. And I'm testing out a new add-in for a friend as part of a pilot group, and it might be what's causing this Power Query issue. So that's basically how I fix it. I go out and I go back in, and it fixes itself. So I'll just go and change the dates. Should be fine. And if there are any errors, it would actually tell me on the loaded rows whether there's errors. So if there's no errors, it won't say anything about errors. Okay, so that's the cash book, and then finally we want to get data from another Excel workbook, and that would be the debtors ledger. So over here I'm going to show you how to do a reference as well as a, so it's just quickly before I get there, what a duplicate and a reference of a query is. So maybe I can just quickly showcase that. So this is our let's call it debtors ledger, and essentially, let's say for instance I want to keep my opening and closing balances. What I could do is I could potentially filter out. I could remove the top rows, for instance, top 2 rows, and then promote my headers, and then maybe remove this filters does not equal, remove these blanks, and then I'm just left with things like that. But I want to maybe keep my balances to have a debtors balances section. Then what I could do is I could make a reference, and the reference would actually reference the source of the debtors ledger. The problem with this is if I make changes to my debtors ledger, for instance, let's say for instance I filter out all the nulls there, then the same happens there because it's referencing the debtors ledger at its final step. So that's why in this case I don't want to make a reference. I wanted to create a duplicate, and the duplicate that's basically showing the difference. So if I remove my filtered rows and I right click and I say duplicate or duplicate, then it will basically have done the same steps as I've done previously. So it basically copies it at that point in time. But if I make changes to this now, if I now go and filter out anything there, it still exists on the other query, and that's why it's a reference. So let's build the balances. So let's do the balances quickly. So debtors balances is essentially now going to I want to maybe copy over the customer. So wait, let's maybe delete, and so that we don't have to do it twice. I'm just going to work on my debtors ledger, and I want to carry my customer across. So again, I'll create a conditional column, and I'll basically say that if my date contains does not contain a colon, then basically output the date column. Otherwise, not else if, otherwise return null, and then full down. I almost want to create a faster way to do this because I do it quite a lot. And now I can filter out everything else, but I want to keep my balances for now. Right, so what that means is I can now create my duplicate, call it balances, and then I can basically remove anything that's null on this, so it does not equal, and then I can actually remove, I can filter for anything that contains balance in this case. So I can now say anything that does contain, and then I just want to look for the word balance, not specifically just opening balances. So that will return for me everything, opening balances and closing balances, and that's per customer. So now I'll basically take this to the beginning, and you'll see that the rest of the columns are useless. So I'll just use these. These 3 columns, holding Control, select them, remove the other columns, and then I would want to split this between opening and closing balances and dates. So I can split column by delimiter, and the delimiter in this case would be custom, and I would go space, as space, add space, and click on OK. So it basically shows me opening balance, closing balance, date, and that's it, right? So I can now go and change my type, in this case using locale, as we have in the past. So as you see, this could take a lot of time initially, but once we've done this properly once and we've built it properly, we never have to do it again. I might also want to split this column by the limiter, and in this case I would want to split it by the colon, just to have the customer code separate. So this would be customer code, and then customer name, and then this would be balance, and this would be date. Hopefully the locale works now. No. Right, so that's already done. And so what I could also do is I could also actually go and pivot or unpivot, right? So I just want to show what that looks like. So if I go pivot column, for instance, if I've selected my balance, I can say my values column is my entry type. Okay, entry type is not the right word. We'll have to change that field name. And then I can say, you know what, sum for me this based on pivoting these. And I just want to show what that looks like. And that's a way for me to put the opening and the closing balance into their own columns, and then have the dates carried across like this. So that's a form of aggregation. So I can also do that. I mean, you can do a lot of other things that you would do using SQL, things like GROUPBY. Like I said, pivot and unpivot is also an option. So, but in this case, I'm happy with the data and the shape that it is currently. So I'll just keep that. Then my debtors ledger. I've got my customer. I'll just carry that to the beginning. So I'll move that to the beginning, and I want to remove now everything that references a customer or a balance. And in this case, I can see that my document is a good field potentially. Something I've just remembered is I want to potentially just make this amount, and then all my fields are fine. So in this case, I might want to actually move on the cumulative, or I might actually want to filter out anything that does not equal null in the cumulative numbers there, just to be sure that I've got that working correctly. Again, I would want to potentially want to make sure that I remove blanks from these, and so what we could do is we could go and replace values. It might be that my type is I've broken Power Query now. Clicked on something I shouldn't have. Okay, let's just go out for now. I'm going to keep all the changes. Then to go back, I just want to double click on the debtors ledger. And then I can hopefully now select these two, select those two, right click up here. So yeah, for some reason I can't do a replace values from the drop down, but I can replace values from the actual header itself. And then values to find, I can leave blank, and I can replace it with a 0, and basically go and click on OK, and that would work hopefully. And then what I can then do is I can convert these into decimal numbers, and then I can go and create my column, and my custom column is basically going to be amount, and we will have a debit less plus, so negative, I'll go negative credit plus debit, okay, and that works. And then I'll basically go and remove the rest. So I'll just drag it here, select everything preceding it, and go and remove other columns. So that would in this case, that's not what I wanted, so let's just take this out, okay. So the reordering of columns didn't work properly, so let's just go and remove those columns. So we have amount and the rest. Contra account is completely blank. Let's just make sure. Yes, it is, so I can remove that column as well. And I have my description, I've got my amount, entry type is fine, the date is fine. I can then transform that using locale. Hopefully it works this time. Nope, doesn't seem like it. And then I can split my column by delimiter in this case, as I've done previously. Custom space, colon space, okay, and I can call this customer code and customer name, okay, and then again just close and load, wait for it to load. It didn't need to refresh, I guess, because it's connection only. And then hopefully I can now change type using locale, and then we're done with Power Query. Right, so date using UK. Wonderful. Okay, so now I'll just load my debtors ledger. Just need to wait for it to load. Just load my debtors ledger to a table, add it to the data model in the new worksheet, and do the same with my debtors balances. Load to table, new worksheet, data model. Okay. Right, and as always, I can quickly add some formatting to this, and same with my debtors ledger, add some formatting, and we're done. So now next steps would be, because these are input data, because they are input data, I would color them similarly. So I might want to add a color to them so that I know that they are inputs. And now I can get into the formulas, but before I get into the formulas, I think I'll do the pivot table first, just to showcase what the pivot table looks like. But before I do that, I wanted to just add one more step to this, and That is by going into Power Pivot. So going into the data model itself, but in this case I want to go into the relationships part of it. And there's a different view to this that I can add as well, but let me just show what that looks like. So I could say, you know what, I want to connect my TB to from an account number perspective, and I want to link that to the chart of accounts from an account number perspective. And what that does is it basically connects those two and says that the account number is the key field that connects those two records. And what that means is I can now build a pivot table with the data model, and what that means is I don't need that data in my sheets. If I deleted all those sheets and they were in connection only, but they were in the data table, I could still manage these relationships and I could still build a pivot table on that, which is awesome and critical to know. If I go into the actual data model itself, I would need to enable some of the data analysis features, but in this case, it gives me the ability to see everything that is in the data table or in the data model. So I can see my TB is there, my chart of accounts. I don't know why the chart of accounts is there twice. TB is there twice again, doesn't matter. But what I can do is I can, in my diagram at the bottom here, I can also go and connect these things up. So I could also say, you know what, my GL, my chart of accounts links from an account number perspective as well. And I mean chart of accounts and chart of accounts, I don't know why there's two, TB and TB. So I could link all of them up like that and showcase how that works. So that's something I can do. And once I'm done, what I can also do is in Power Pivot, and I'll probably do a separate session on Power Pivot itself. But in Power Pivot, I can use cube functions, and I can also use DAX functions, and both those functions are very powerful in adding more measures. So in this case, what I can do is I can add measures, and I can insert functions, and I can do quite a lot of things on this side as well. And then I can get back into Excel by clicking on Switch to Workbook, and I guess that's what I wanted to show. What I can now do is I can now go and say, you know what, insert pivot table from data model, and in this case I want to put it in the existing worksheet over there, and I'll click on OK. You can see here that I've got these little yellow bins, and the yellow bins is actually what enables me to access the data model. So with this, I can now say, well, I can access the cash book or the chart of accounts. So let's say from a chart of account perspective, I want to drop statement into rows. My camera's not in the right place, so let me just move my camera quickly. Okay, so hopefully it's in a better spot now. But essentially, now I can add my statement, I can add my classification, I can add my second layer of classification. So I'm building an income statement balance sheet structure here, and I can now go and select income statement, for instance, and hover over until I can actually click and drag it, and I can put income statement first if I wanted to. I can put sales above cost of sales and expenses, and other income above those as well. Actually, I want to put this one over there so that it follows more of the flow. And assets, equity, liabilities is pretty much fine. And so I can do that from a sort of structure perspective. But then what I can do is I can start including. I can also include my account name in this case as well if I wanted to. And then clicking on this, I can go and click on this little collapse field, which collapses it again, but that enables me to expand it later on. So that's what I wanted from my chart of accounts. From my TB, I might want to include my current year number, so I could include my current year number. So that is my TB amount, and I want to maybe call that TB. So I could call that TB directly like that, and under my value field settings, I want it to be a sum, but I want to basically give it a proper 1000 separator in 2 decimal places. Maybe not. Maybe let's remove the decimal places so that it follows more of the look of an actual accounting, what do you call it, financial statements. So maybe I also put in the prior year like that, just call it PY, but in this case it won't allow me to just call it POI because, it does. Weird. Because it is a field, so if it doesn't allow me to do that, I might just go space, PY space, but it allowed me there for some reason. Again, just want to change the formatting quickly, remove the separators, and there we go. Okay. The nice thing about this is if my backend data changes, I can just come right-click refresh or click up there on refresh, and everything will pull through the latest data from my Power Query source, which means next month I pull in the new TB, numbers change, I just basically go and refresh everything, and my new TB is updated. I never have to do this again. I never have to do the preparation again. What I can now do as well is I can bring in my GL data. So I can now, because this is connected, I can bring in my GL amount as well. And that basically brings this across as well. Weird. I thought I had built that relationship, but it didn't accept it. So I can see that because this is income statement, it's not used. But if I quickly go and clean this up, I can just go and add that little formatting, and essentially I also don't want the 2 decimals, so I'll just go 0 decimals, and I'll call this GL. And I see my PY also has 2 decimals, so I'll just go like that. Sorry, 0. So now I can actually see that this equals this, right? Because when it comes to income statement, my income statement closes off to my retained earnings, which is possibly why this amount is very similar to that amount. See, this is blank. I guess we'll figure it out if we interrogate that a little bit. But I can see my cost of sales is not exactly the same. It's just a rounding issue. Literally just a rounding issue. So I could go equals round of this to 2 digits equals the round of that by 2 digits, and that'll hopefully fix it. But I can see that in the end my full income statement agrees from a TB and a GL perspective. I can see that my assets aren't looking fine, so there might be some reconciliations that still needs to be done on the balance sheet side, but this is now a big step that a lot of accountants and financial managers need to do on a monthly basis, that could take you minutes next month because you've set it up in a specific way, and you've built your things in such a way. What I've also done from a pivot table perspective in the other document, and I just want to close up any stuff that I've got open, but in the other document, just to showcase, on the pivot side, I could basically take all my months across, and you can see that they ordered incorrectly, but again, it's as simple as potentially just going April, May, June, July. There are ways of automating that as well, but we won't cover that. March needs to be there. I guess it's not going to take a lot of time, and once you order it once, the next time it'll be in that order. But you could do it monthly as well, which is for a different purpose. So, right, if I wanted to add the months, I could just go into this, and under the GLs, section, I could add the month to my columns, and I'm not going to do that now, but it'll just break the rest of the stuff, but you get the gist. Okay, so that's the pivot side of things. Let's go into the AND operator. So the AND operator, I guess all I wanted to show is the fact that you could go and say, you know what, I've got so let's just do this. Just want to open up my crib notes so that I don't do something else. But essentially, I could say, you know what, I've got my debtors ledger, right? So I've got my debtors ledger, and in my debtors ledger, I've got a customer name. If I just run this, it'll spill down all the customer names, but it'll spill down the whole column. Okay. So if I wanted the unique of that, I'll just go unique, and that gives me the unique of that customer name. Now, let's say I want to take entry types and I want to add those. Right? I could go and Ampersand, and then I could go customer ledger. Debtors ledger, and I could go entry type, and if I do that, what's going to happen is it's going to basically spill down, and it'll have customer 3 to whatever, and then sales, and then etc. Right? So, but in this case, I wanted to spill over the 2 columns, and I want to also spill the unique of the entry type. So how do I do that? So I'll basically go and say, I want the unique of that entry type. Okay, so it's basically just going to create a unique between those 2. But I want this value. So if I just take this portion, let me just copy this portion across just to explain it properly. If I go equals that, you'll basically see you've got sales and you've got customer cash book 1 receipts. I want to transpose that data. So basically, I can just wrap that in the transpose function, add the closing parameters, parentheses, and then basically spills over the 2, and this is a dynamic array. It spills over the 2 columns now. So if I take this back, and let me just cut this out and put it over there, and basically go and put that, remove the little equals, then I've basically got unique of debtors ledger and the transposed entry type, and that would, for every customer, create a sales and a receipts portion of both those. And I can go and sort this now as well. I could go and say sort this array, and what it'll do is it'll basically sort this by the customer number, and I might also want to put a little dash, so I'll just put a little space, dash space, another ampersand, because it's a concatenation. And it basically just cleans that up a little bit. I see in my other example I put a colon there, so let's just put a colon there. Okay, and that's just to show how the ampersand operator can work with these things as well. My sort array, you'll see that I could just put in the sort array. I could have put a sort index. So the sort index, I can actually go and sort by sales and receipts as well. So I could sort by the second column, and I can sort it descending or ascending. So what it'll do is, by default, it would sort by the first column ascending as default. And you can also sort by column if you wanted to. So sort is quite powerful in that case as well. What I also did was I just split this out. So if you double click, I think you don't have to double click. You just single click this. You can just expand your formula bar, and you can go Alt Enter to take this into a next row. And what I like to do is I like to just put 3 spaces or 4 or 5. So 1, 2, 3, and then I will basically split this over 1, 2, 3 over separate lines so that it's more readable. And that's what I did in the final example. So let's just cover the ampersand, the rest of the ampersand. If you wanted to create a sort of address block of this, you could go equals, and then let's go and select that ampersand, select that. You can see that this is actually referring to the spilled reference of E5, which is a sequence function, and I'll show the sequence function now. But essentially, it's just basically saying, give me a sequence of 10 numbers. And sequence is very powerful because I could say, you know what, give me 10 numbers over 2 columns. Start at the number 2 step by 2. There's many things I can do with sequence. So if I go into sequence quickly, let's say I want to do 5 rows, 2 columns. I want to start at 2 step by 2. Then you'll see I get 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20. So the sequence function is severely powerful once you start playing with it. But I guess that's for a different video. Otherwise, many good videos out there. Maybe I'll find another one and post a little link of a video that covers the sequence function. I guess we'll go into XLOOKUP. Okay, next up we want to essentially do a lookup of data balances. So I could use my unique function again and select data balances customer code to bring back the unique customer codes. Next up, I want to XLOOKUP. So in this case, I want to just look up the values in this spilled reference. So you can see there I've got B8 hash. If I select it like that, I could have just selected B8 and added the hash, typed in the hash, or if I do the actual selection of B8, if I do the actual selection of B8 and Control Shift down, it also automatically changes the reference to fill like that. The lookup array would be my data balances and my customer name, or my customer code. Sorry, I'm comparing code to code. So looking it up in customer code and returning customer name. So data's balances customer name. I could go to the source itself, but I find it easier to type it like this if I know exactly what I'm doing. Close the parentheses, and there I've got my customer name. You can also see that I've added a formula text at the top so that you can see whether you can follow along with the actual function itself. Now for the opening and closing balance, I can actually return that full array like that. And what I can do is I could just go XLOOKUP again, look up my customer code potentially, or even my customer name, doesn't matter. In my data's balances, this is not the most effective way to do it, but I want to showcase just how XLOOKUP works. In this case, my return array is my data's balances, and essentially, no, sorry, not data's balances, and I want to return both. Okay, so in this case, I want to return both my opening balance and my closing balance. So now what I want to do is I want to actually look up the code and this value, and in this case I want to basically lock for the first reference I want to lock the columns so that it doesn't move as my function moves, but in this case, so previously I would have locked the functions, but in this case I can now go and refer to this range as a range to look up in. And again, okay, so let's just bring it back. So what are we doing? We're doing what we did on the previous sheet. We're essentially building a lookup like this, right? So now I'm just wrapping this in an XLOOKUP and basically saying look it up against my data's balances code, so customer code, and concatenate that with my data's balances and the actual balance. Okay, and then what am I returning? I'm returning the amount. So I'm returning the debtors balances amount, and that would bring back my opening and my closing balances. Just need to see why it's billing not applicables quickly. So if I go to debtors balances, I might have some ranges that need trimming. Opening balance, closing balance, 1, 2, 3. So let's just see which ones have issues. Customer 4 closing balance has an issue. So if we look at customer 4, okay, it doesn't have a closing balance. Okay, so in that case, I can just make it a 0. Maybe it's not the right way to do it, but we'll do that for the purposes of this example. So essentially, if not found, make it 0. And then this is now basically a spilled array. So you can see that this is basically spilling everything for us across in the shape that we require it, using my actual references above, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so now if I want to do a sum of these two columns, I want to make it dynamic. I can't just go and say sum of. I can just go and say sum of that, and basically sum of that if I wanted to. But in this case, I want to write one dynamic array formula, and to do that, I'll just go by column. So essentially, by col applies a lambda function to each column, and returns an array of the results. So I'll basically go and by column of my full array, apply the sum function, and that would automatically spill both for me. Previously, before we had these functions like this, I could only do a lambda. So in this case, I would have just gone by col lambda x sum of x, and that should also work. And why does that work? Because the by col function essentially takes the full reference and sort of indexes it. So it takes the full first column and applies the lambda, makes that full first column the value of x, and then does the sum of that full first column, and basically loops through to the second column and does that. So, but these days, instead of all of that, we can just do sum. Okay, cool. So that's XLOOKUP. Next up, we're doing GROUPBY. Okay, so the GROUPBY function is a new function, and essentially we're also going to work on the cash book for this one. And what I can basically do is I can create a GROUPBY which aggregates values by a row field. The difference between GROUPBY and Pivotby is that Pivot also allows me to have column values, and we'll do Pivotby next up as well. So if I go GROUPBY, then firstly it wants me to spill the row fields. So I'm going to use, like I said, the cash book, and let's go to the cash book, and essentially I want to basically spill it by name, and I'm going to click. So in most cases, if I reference, you'll see it basically says CB name. If I hold that button and I click again, it'll basically say CB all name. And what that notation means is it's including the column or the field headers, and I'll explain why we do that now. But I could have just gone and included the name, then I just don't carry the headers along with me. Okay. Then next up, what are the values that we're trying to group by? So I want to carry over the tax and the amount. And basically what I do is I'll click and click again, hold my button and drag. Okay. Let me do that again. So I click and drag across, and then it does the same thing. It takes CB all, tax and amount, And the function that I want to apply on that is the sum function, because I just want to do a sum of that. So I want to essentially group it by the different names, do a sum on that. And my field headers in this case is a yes and show. Yes, I do have field headers and I want to show it. Okay. And then I can also choose like total depth. So it can include grand totals and subtotals at the top, at the bottom. So essentially grand totals at the top or at the bottom, grand and subtotals at the bottom, and there's the both those options at the top. But again, it's in block brackets, so it's not a required field. I can also specify a sort order, so I can basically say what it should be sorted by. It would automatically sort by the first column in the row fields selection. And then I can also apply a filter array on it, and maybe I'll show you a bit of a filter array on that as well. We'll do that now. And then we also can include a field relationship. So if fields are a part of a hierarchy, the subtotals may not be shown, and we can basically say that the relationship is either hierarchical or a table. Alright, so let's just close that, and you can see basically we've got this group by. I've applied some conditional formatting rules, so let me just showcase the rules. Essentially, basically I'm saying if formula B1 is a $B1, and the dollar essentially means it'll apply it across and this reference breaks for some reason, but let's not care about that for now. But essentially it's basically saying if B1, in this case B6, if that contains the word name, then apply this formatting. Otherwise, if it includes total, then apply that formatting. And the nice thing about that is as this grows and expands, you can essentially it'll essentially move with the data, and that's pretty much it. So if we want to add a slicer to this, perhaps a little new trick is to add a filter to this. And I mean, I'm going to do this now, but the next time I refresh, that filter function might actually fall away. So I would potentially build that maybe into the Power Query side of things, but just to showcase how the filter works, I use the subtotal function, and there I can use count A, or in this case 103 count A. I think this 103 count A is more backwards compatible. So yeah, the subtotal 103 is more backwards compatible in my opinion, and essentially I'm just going to basically do a count A function on this, and I can use any of the fields that I know won't contain a blank, and date would be one of them, for instance, and that would essentially do a count like that. And what I can then do is I can go and say, all right, based on that, apply a slicer. So if I add a slicer to this table design, I can say insert slicer, and I can, for instance, now say, well, insert slicer by reference, maybe, and maybe description, and then click on OK. And then I can go and cut these slices, go and Control X to cut it, and I can put it next to my group by. I might want to take these and expand them into 2 columns, widen them a bit, and then maybe align them a bit. So I'll just select both of them, go to align and align top, and there we go. And if all goes well, I could go and say my filter array is in this case let's just see if I can just go CB and filter. Hopefully that works. Didn't like that. No, sorry, that's total depth. So I want that to be in the filter array. Okay, and then if I click on that, it basically goes and filters it for me. So now I've got a bit more of a dynamic function, and I can go exclude T, for instance, exclude receipt, exclude VAT payment, exclude bank charges, and be left with the rest, which is pretty awesome if you ask me. Alright, that's the group by function. Alright, so next up we'll do the pivot by function, and there's something I want to show before we get to pivot by, and that is essentially I wanted to add the month names. So if we quickly go back into Power Query, I can go into the GLs, double click on that, and then I want to derive the month name from my date. And a cool trick is I can say columns from examples, and I can basically do that from a selection or from all columns. If I do from selection, it'll basically take it from the date, and then I can start typing something like March, for instance, and it'll automatically pick up that I'm trying to derive the month name from date. If I just type in month, for instance, then you'll see that I can extract the days in the month from the date. So essentially the end of month function, or I can get the month number from the date, or the month name from the date, or the full date of the end of month from the date, or the week of month. So in this case, I'm looking to actually bring back March, and if I click on OK, that'll basically bring back the name of the month that I'm trying to extract, and I can then take that and put that next to my month number. So I've got month number and month name. Quickly go back, close and load, and that should then appear in my data set once the GL loads. So now if I go and click on that filter, I've got all the months in my data set over here as well. Okay, so then if we go into the pivot by function, or the pivot by function, again a new function. It was released with the group by function. It aggregates values by rows and columns, and that's the difference between the pivot by and the group by. Is pivot by has columns as well, group by is just by rows. All right, so the row fields that I'm looking for is essentially in my GL, so I'm going to just select that from my GL, and in this case I want to put my account number in there. So I'll just basically hover and select my account number, and then I'm not going to select the field headers in this case, and you'll see why in a second. We don't really need it in this case. And then basically my column fields in this case would be month name and year perhaps. Okay, and then next up I want to take the values of my amount column, and I want to apply a sum to that, and then I can just close that off if I wanted to, and that would essentially spill for me the full data set that I'm looking for. This conditional formatting is now seeing this as an empty, which is why it's returning yellow. Don't stress about that. We can always remove the conditional formatting there, which is maybe what I'll quickly do. Is I'll just go and clear that from the selected cells. Okay, so as you can see, I have formatted this already. You could also apply conditional formatting on all of this. Not necessary, but a very nice addition if this changes quite a lot. If your account numbers change a lot potentially. All right. So if I wanted to now bring in my trial balance, I guess what I wanted to just show is that we could use now. If I for instance go and I use the take function, okay, and I go and take from this spilled range, the B5 hash, take the first column. Then basically what it'll do is it'll bring back this entire column. Apologies, I've got toddlers running around here as well. So if I take that first column and I wrap that in an XLOOKUP, use that as my lookup value, and then look up from my TB the account number, and then return from my TB the amount current year. Then and then if not found, I'll just make it blank and close that up. What that does is it dynamically spills for me the whole closing balance of the TB across, and I can do the same with the opening balance. So again, go and XLOOKUP the take of my spilled array, not that one, first column, and lookup array is TB account number, and return array is TB prior year. If not found, blank. I get the same, or I get the opening balance essentially. And then what's awesome and what I just wanted to show is the fact that I can now go and say, take that amount, those amounts, the spilled array, and deduct that array from it. And basically what it'll do is it'll spill the calculation of closing versus opening to determine movement. And with this I could just go and say if error. So if you incur an error, just go and put blanks, because those are text values. Again, I can remove these with conditional formatting, clear from selected cells, and that's it. So I've basically now done that portion, and now I can see exactly where the differences are. It's not accurate by accounting measures, but just an example, I guess. So yeah, let's look at the filter function. Right. So if we look at the filter function, I'm firstly using these new checkboxes that you can add from Excel. You'll find that on the insert tab, insert checkbox. So I can just go and select arrange like this and insert a checkbox. And what's nice about the checkboxes is I can interact with them. They essentially contain a false or a true, and I can change that value with the space bar. And then what I can also do is I can select all with the space bar, select none with the space bar. So that's very nice. So selecting all of them and adding a spacebar or not. Okay, so firstly what I want to do is I just want to get back a unique of all the categories, because I want to be able to filter by category. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try and get a unique of chart of accounts category. Okay, so let's just firstly get that, and I want to sort this by just to showcase sort by. If I want to sort this by so essentially I want to sort my array that I've just spilled, and I want to sort it by another array, and that array is in this case the category code, for instance. So if the category code makes that it's grouped in order of sort of type, then I could do that, and essentially that sort by. Sorry, I need to also unique that, otherwise it's not comparing apples with apples. So do a unique of that, and basically that then spills for me all of the different chart of account categories. You can see my face is in the way again. And then next up, I want to go and basically do a filter. So just bear with me. I want to filter this array with that array, or by that array. And if it's empty, I just want to not return anything, just blanks. Okay, and basically that's what it is now. It's a blank, but as soon as I select something, it starts populating that list for me. Again, the filter function allows for a dynamically spilled range, which is a very nifty little trick. And once I've got this information, I can then go and apply a global filter on my GL, for instance, or I can apply a global filter on my chart of accounts. So let's go and apply another filter, and the filter is basically going to be done, and I'm gonna use the choose. So wait, let's just start with choose columns. So if I take choose columns of chart of accounts, then I can say I want to basically return the first 4 columns. So I want to return column 1, 2, 3, and 4. As you can see, I can choose many columns. I can just choose one as well if I wanted to, and it will work similar to a take or a drop, but I can choose any column in the middle as well. And if I just do that, it basically spills my whole chart of accounts, and it gives me the first 4 columns of the chart of accounts. I could skip 3, for instance, as well, and just return 1, 2, and 4. Up to you. Alright, so that's choose columns. Then the next one is filter. So I want to filter that array, that chosen columns array, and I want to include it. I want to include where we have a count. So I'm going to use count if, which is a method for me to essentially determine where does if I have more than one filter criteria in this case, which is essentially this spilled range, right? So I want to return just where all these categories are equal to that chart of accounts category. So I'm going to say, again, refer to the chart of accounts, the category, and basically filter for me where it's equal to the selection on the right. And if it's empty, you can just return blanks, or you could return something like no selection. So let's return no selection, just to show what that looks like. So if we have no selection, so let's do no selection, then it basically says no selection. Okay, I would prefer blank, but that's fine. And if we select everything, it basically, you'll see that it basically returns the whole chart of accounts. Otherwise, if I just select so let's just select nothing. If I then select long-term liability or long-term borrowings, I can see that. Expenses, for instance, there's my whole list of expenses. So my filter function is working exactly like I wanted it to. And that's basically what I wanted to showcase for the filter function. Next up, we've got let. So we'll cover let now. Let's just make sure that everything is working like it should. So essentially, let's start with the legend sheet, and we're in the last straight essentially. For statement. So okay, let's just back up a sec. So what I want to do is I want to be able to give my users the ability to select from a drop-down box the statement, and then it automatically populates class 1. When I select class 1, it automatically selects class 2, or allows me to get to class 2. Account name, same thing, only from the class 2 selected, and then the month only from the months where there's data for, or that there's data for. So if I take statement, for instance, that would be the unique of from my chart of accounts, my statement category, and that brings back balance sheet and income statement. Then what I want to do is I want to give this I'm going to give this a name. So I'll just showcase what I've done up to this point. I essentially have account name selected, and that would just be that field. So that's statement selected, that's class 1 selected, that's class 2 selected, that's account name selected, and that's month selected. And that's just for me to easily refer back to this. It's easy to create that function or to name that range. You just go on a cell or a range and you just change the value in there. Or you could, well, you change the value in there and you press enter, or you could go to the formulas, go into the name manager, and there you can actually see all your names, and you can see that refers to, in my let sheet, refers to cell 3 for C3 4 5 6 7. Okay. And I can change that and edit that and change the scope, etc. So we'll spend some time in that. But firstly, balance sheet, income statement, that's my statement. And then next up, that's my statement selection option. Next up, I want to get class 1. And class 1 is essentially going to be, well, equal to chart of accounts, and it's class, or just classification. Okay. So classification, that gives me all of that. So I don't want to necessarily get all of that. So I want to get a unique list. So I can do unique of CoA classification. That gives me this. And then, but I want to filter this by what I've selected in the statement block, right? Because now what I can do is I can go under my data tab, and under my data validation, select the list and click on F3 and basically get a name reference, but I haven't saved that name yet. So let's go back and let's save this reference, which is B3 hash. Save this reference as and now we're going to see a little bug in Excel, but we'll talk about that. I can go and define a name if I want, or create a name from selection. Let's do create from selection. Sorry, no, I don't want to do that. Create name from selection would actually take a whole block of information and save it by the actual name at the top, which might actually work in this case. But let's just define a name. I want to call that name by this description at the top, which is underscore statement, and in this case I don't want it to refer to legend B3 B4. I want it to be dynamic, so I'm going to remove this and just make it a hash and click on OK. If we go into the name manager, you'll see that statement equates to an array with ellipses. But to test it, I can just go and press F3 if I wanted to. F3 opens up this little block and then select statement, and you'll see that it refers to the right block, and I can press enter and it basically spills as a dynamic array. Okay. What I can also do is in my name manager, I can also go in statement, and then I believe I can just click there, yes, and you'll see that refers to the correct spilled range. Could do the same for class now. For class, I can basically go into my name manager, click on new, and then call that underscore class 1, and then just add that little hash, and that would it should work. Let me just make sure it's not highlighting now, but that should work perfectly. If I click on in that, you can see that it's referring to the full spilled reference. Okay, so that means we can build our data validation now. Can go into data validation and click on list and press F3 again and select statement and click on OK. Now I can select balance sheet and income statement. Marvelous. Okay, so I've selected balance sheet now. Now for class 1, I can refer to my spilled reference again, data validation, list, click there, F3, and essentially select class 1, click on OK, and I've got my selection. Okay, but now I want this to only spill according to what I've selected at the top there. So how do I do that? I basically go and say, under my legend, do a filter. So filter for me that classification and include where my CoA class classification, my CoA statement is equal to underscore statement selected. Okay, because that's what I've selected in the lead sheet. Okay. Okay, it doesn't like the unique, I believe. I need to wrap the unique outside. So that should work. And then I'll just wrap this in the unique outside. Right. And just to explain how that works, maybe I could showcase the evaluation of the formula. You'll see that CoA classification spills the full F2 to F88, and CoA statement is essentially going to determine everywhere where it matches balance sheet and not income statement. So if I evaluate statement selected with that, you'll see that it's basically picking up that my statement selected is balance sheet. If I evaluate, it's basically evaluating back a bunch of trues and falses. And because I've wrapped the unique too early, it's trying to compare the 6 or 7 classes with the 70 odd classes that it's returning on the filter. So it's not comparing apples with apples, which is why I'm comparing all of F2 to F88 with those, and it's essentially telling me which to include and which to exclude. And that's how it's spilling into equity, liabilities, and assets. If I select balance sheet, and if I select income statement, it basically brings back sales, cost of sales, other income, and expenses. Okay, so that's working as we want, because if I now have income statement, I can select sales, for instance, or expenses in this case. And now we do the same for classification 2. So class 2 is essentially, and sorry, the other thing that I want to do is if I have no selection, so let's say for instance, to remove that, if I have no selection, I don't want this to spill a calc error. I want this to actually bring back the full class. So what I can do is I can just say if empty, if the filter, if it's empty, just bring back the full chart of accounts classification. Okay, and basically do the same now for class 2. So for class 2, I can I can go and say same thing, unique filter, chart of accounts classification 2, include where CoA classification is equal to the class 1 selected. Otherwise, bring back CoA classification 2 and close the if that's the if empty, and we want unique, and that's bringing back exactly what I want. Again, I can go and hook that up with the data validation list F3, and in this case we're looking for class 2. Didn't save it yet, so I'll just go and select formulas, define name, call it underscore class 2, and remove the rest of the reference, add the hash, and click on OK. And now I can go back and hook that up. Data validation list source F3 class 2. OK, and we've got it. Okay, so now let's test it. We've got income statement, we've got expenses, class 2, operating expenses. Beautiful. So it's working as expected, and you can see that this moves with that selection as well. Now account name works in exactly the same way. So let's not build the whole function again. Let's just copy out the whole function, just change elements. So we want to return account name, and otherwise return the account name, and we want to test it where the classification 2 is equal to class 2 selected. Okay, so this is just bringing back all the operating expenses, and in this case now I can define my name. So formulas, define name. This is account name, so account name, and we're referring to the spilled reference there. I hope the screen is visible. Okay, and click on OK. And lastly, I want months. So this is just basically unique of the so again we can use sort by here. So sort by, and we want to basically bring back the unique. Where is it in GL? We want to get months. So why is GLs, and we want to get the month name. So bring back the unique list of month names in GLs and sort that by the unique GLs month number. So we can sort it by the month number, and that should be it. So you'll see now it basically works perfectly as March, April, May, June, July, August, September. Otherwise, if I didn't have the sort by, it would have been April, then August, then you get the gist. Okay, then probably June, then probably July, or firstly whatever. So this is just sorting by the actual number of the month, and with this I can call it now. Again, let's just select the first one, define the name, go underscore months. That's the name we want, and just add the little hash, and get back to this, hook it up, data, validation, list F3, and in this case we're looking for account name. Okay, and in this case we can quickly select something like bank charges, and then go and say list of F3, and we want months. Okay, and we can choose any of our months now. Alright, so now we go for the filter function. I just want to quickly go to this part. So we don't need to use all of these values for filter, but I guess the reason for this is just because I wanted to show what the let is for, what the let function is for, and how it's used. Okay, and essentially what I can do is I can go and apply my filter function, but let's use let first. So essentially let, so let assigns calculation results to names. It's useful for storing intermediate calculations and values by defining names inside a formula. So essentially you're giving names for steps, and then you can use within that scope of that let function, you can use those names again. So let's see what that means. Follow me here up top. Okay, so essentially we can now go and define a name like account name. Okay, and basically I can then refer to a value or a function or a formula or a reference or whatever. So in this case I can go and say underscore account name selected, because that's going to refer to my bank charges in this case. So that's my account name, and then I can say, for instance, month selected within my scope, and I can say that is underscore month selected. Okay, don't need to do this step, but it's just to show why we can use the let function and how we can use it. Now let's get the account number, because that's not something we have, but we want to actually bring back GL information, and the GL doesn't have the account name in it. So we're going to have to do some sort of lookup, right? So if we want to do account number, so I'm just going to go AC number, comma, and you can see I'm going Alt Enter in between steps, and I'm putting a comma in between every name and every sort of value or calculation. Okay. So now account number is going to be an XLOOKUP. I'm going to look up the account name. So now see, I refer to the account name over there that I defined over there. So I can reuse this value multiple times inside this let function. That's the reason or the purpose of the let. So I want to compare account name with my chart of accounts, because my chart of accounts contains my account name, and I want to return my account number. So I want to say chart of accounts, account number. Okay. So that is that part. If not found, just bring back text or bring back blank. Okay. Remember the comma. Alt Enter. Okay, so that's the account number. Now I want to extract my GL data. So I'm going to call this GL data, and the GL data can now be brought back as a filter. The filter that I want to filter is my entire GL's data set, my Power Query data set, and I want to include where my account number is equal to the account number selected, and or the account number that we've just looked up, and I also want to do that where the month selected is equal. So with the filter, how it works is you can use multiplication and addition, and there's a video, and hopefully I'll remember, but I'll link it up top, a video on my channel called the Definitive Guide for Filter that explains why we can use, for instance, 1 multiplied by 1 or 1 plus 1, and why 1 multiplied by 1 would be 1, which means it's an AND, because if both of them are not true or 1, then it will return 0. But if it's plus 1, it's an OR functionality, because if either of them is 1, then it basically would return true, and 2 would also return true. I explained that in a lot more detail there, so please go check that video. So to do that, I need to wrap both of them in parentheses. Okay. So how that works is I'm going to say where my GL's account number is equal to AC number. So again, I'm referring to the same name that I called up here. So where my account number is equal to AC number, and where GL's month, in this case month name, is equal to the month selected. And in this case again, I can use month selected in there. Like I said, I didn't need to do this. I could have used them directly, but if I'm using the name multiple times, or if I'm using the calculation multiple times, let's say I want to use the XLOOKUP multiple times, I could just go and name it account number and shorten my function. And as you can see, the only sort of inputs into this would be the first 2 parameters. The rest of them are fed from the rest of the function. So yes, I'm saying where account number is equal to account number in the GLs, and where account name is equal to month selected. And if empty, just return a blank and close it up. And now I can close up my let. Oh, not yet. What I can now do is I want to only bring back certain columns, only certain columns of my GL. I don't want to return the full GL. I just want to return account number, date, entry type, reference, description, amount. And I want to wrap all of this in an if error, because it might bring back errors, and if there's an error, I just want to return blanks. And basically you can close this up. So what do I want to return? I just want to choose columns from my GL data that I've just defined. So choose columns from GL data, and the columns that I've previously decided on is column 1, 2, 6, 7, 9, 9 and 10. That won't work. So 1, 2, 6, 7, 9 and 10. That's what I want to choose, and I believe that should bring back exactly what I'm looking for. And evidently I've actually selected the same selection as in the example file, but now the sky's the limit. So I can go and say, you know what, bring back August, and it basically works as expected. Bring back May, bring back March. Okay, it seems like they were the same, but you can see the dates changed. Okay, and then lastly I want to maybe do a sum of the amount column, and what I can do, so let's just look for somewhere where we've got some values. So I think we have sales for every month, so let's go income statement sales, and I want to bring back sales, and I want to bring back let's go sales of goods, and I want to bring back that for the month of April. Nope, services, nope, other, nope, sales. Okay, so we've got data and sales. Okay, and essentially I want to do the sum of that dynamically, which is 1,044,630. So there's many ways to do this. What I can do is I can say sum of take, and then basically that's build range. So take, and then the last column. Okay, so I could go comma, comma, and then -1, which would take the first one from the right, and that would sum it up for me. Or I could use choose columns, choose cols as well. So let's do that one. So it's sum of choose cols of my spilled array, and the column is the 6th column. Okay, and that does the same. Or I could do an index. So I could do index of that array, and I want to bring back the 6th column, and that spills, so I'll just do a sum of that index. Okay, many ways. Right, so I think that's everything I wanted to share. I hope, and if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to me on YouTube, in the comments, on LinkedIn. You can just look for my name, and yeah, I think the idea behind this was just so that you can see what is possible, and that you hopefully can say, well, I've got data monthly that I need to extract, transform, load into Excel, ETL, as I explained in the session with Danielle. And then once I've got that, I need to go and take that data and transform it and make it look neat and pretty, and build a report from it, and maybe even a chart from it, and compare things and aggregate and make it a proper dashboard. So with this, I have the ability to properly dashboard my information, and the magic around that is the data that I'm dashboarding on is not static. My data is a dynamic input from Power Query, and my output is also dynamic. As my data moves, my output moves. That's the perfect combination, which means that never again, if we build this correctly, never again do I need to do this next month. I click on refresh, my report is ready. I maybe do some human judgment checks, and we fix it. And if your report doesn't work, if it breaks, and you're doing something wrong, then reach out to me, and we'll take it from there. Marvelous. Okay, if you did follow along and you watched the whole video, that is flipping amazing. So maybe then I want to do it like the YouTubers do it. Maybe start your comment with your favorite with your favorite section of the video. So whether it was Power Query or GROUPBY or XLOOKUP or Pivot or Pivotby or any of the sub functions that we used, start your comment with that, and I'll see who actually watched it through until the end. Anyway, there's lots of other content out there. I'll do a video soon about how to get started with Excel, depending not dependent on your level, regardless of where you are on your journey. How do you become better? How do you focus? How do you study? How do you actually get to a level where you are irreplaceable and you're just doing magic on Excel. So hopefully we can get all of you there. Take care and look after yourselves. Cheers.